Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the scanner screen again. The coffee in his metal cup had gone cold hours ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. Space was lonely, especially on the long trade routes between the outer colonies and Earth. His cargo ship, the Liberty Dawn, was 3 days out from Kepler Station with a hold full of medical supplies bound for New Geneva Colony. "Captain, we've got something on the sensors," called out Amy Rodriguez from the engineering station. She was young, maybe 25, with grease-stained coveralls and bright eyes that missed nothing. Jake had hired her 2 years ago when she was fresh out of technical school, and she had already saved his ship more times than he could count. Jake walked over to her station, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The Liberty Dawn was not a fancy ship. She was old, reliable, and built for work rather than comfort. Every surface showed wear from years of carrying cargo across the galaxy. "What kind of something?" Jake asked, looking over Amy's shoulder at her screen. "Big something. Maybe a ship, but it's not moving. It's floating out there about 2 million kilometers off our port side." Jake frowned. Its tips did not just float in empty space unless something was very wrong. "Any distress signals?" Amy's fingers moved across her controls. "Yeah, there's something. It's not in standard human format, but the computer is trying to translate it." She paused, listening to her headset. "Okay, got it. It's Vorthan. They're asking for help with engine problems." The Vorthans were one of the more powerful alien races in this part of the galaxy. Their ships were fast, and their weapons were deadly. Most humans gave them plenty of space and tried not to attract their attention. Thorthan Republic had a reputation for being proud and not very friendly to other species. "How big is their ship?" Jake asked. "Medium cruiser class. Toppling has about 50 crew members. But Captain, their power readings are really low. Whatever happened to them, they're in bad shape." Jake thought about it. They were in a dangerous part of space where pirates sometimes attacked lone ships. The smart thing would be to report the Vorthan ship's location to the authorities and keep moving. His medical supplies were needed at New Geneva Colony, and any delay could cost lives. But then again, 50 Vorthans were also lives. "Set course for their position," Jake said, finally. Amy looked surprised. "Captain, are you sure? Vorthans aren't exactly known for being grateful, and we've got a schedule to keep." "We've got time," Jake said, though he was not entirely sure that was true. "Besides, if that was us floating out there, I'd hope someone would stop to help." The Liberty Dawn changed course, her engines humming as they approached the damaged Vorthing vessel. As they got closer, Jake could see the extent of the damage through the viewports. The alien ship was sleek and dangerous, looking even when crippled. But scorch marks along its hull showed where something had gone very wrong. "They're hailing us," Amy reported. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Vorthan ship. The alien who appeared was tall and thin, with gray skin and large golden eyes. He wore what looked like a military uniform, dark blue with silver markings. When he spoke, the translator gave his words a formal, clipped tone. "Human vessel. I am Commander Zethkari of the Vorthan Republic ship, Starwind. We thank you for responding to our distress call." "Captain Jake Morrison of the Liberty Dawn," Jake replied. "What's your situation, Commander?" "Our quantum drive has suffered a cascade failure. We have minimal life support and no propulsion. We were ambushed by raiders 3 hours ago. We destroyed them, but not before they damaged our engines." Jake could see other Vorthans moving around on their bridge, and they all looked worried. These were supposed to be some of the toughest warriors in the galaxy, but right now they just looked like people in trouble. "Can you make repairs?" Jake asked. Zethkari's golden eyes seemed to dim. "Not with the equipment we have. We have sent a message to our fleet, but the nearest Vorthan ships are 6 days away. Our life support will not last that long." Jake made his decision quickly. "Commander, my ship has a large cargo bay. We can dock your vessel inside, and my engineer can help with repairs. It'll be tight, but we can make it work." The Vorthan commander stared at him for a long moment. "Captain Morrison, you would do this? Cannot pay you for such assistance. Our ship's treasury was damaged in the attack." "Did I ask for payment?" Jake said with a small smile. Amy was already running calculations at her station. "Captain, if we take them aboard, it'll add at least 2 days to our journey. Maybe 3, depending on how bad their engine damage is." Jake nodded. "The colony will understand. Medical supplies don't do much good if the people who might need them are already dead." For the next hour, Jake and his small crew worked to position the Liberty Dawn so that the damaged Vorthan ship could be brought into the cargo hold. It was tricky work, requiring precise maneuvering and careful adjustment of the atmospheric shields. But Jake had been flying freight ships for 15 years, and Amy knew the Liberty Dawn systems better than anyone. Once the Vorthan ship was safely inside, Commander Zethkari came aboard with 2 of his officers. Jake met them at the airlock, and he was struck by how tall the Vorthans were. Zethkari stood almost 7 feet high, and his presence seemed to fill the corridor. "Captain Morrison," the commander said formally, "I must tell you that this is highly unusual. In Vorthan culture, we do not accept charity. All debts must be repaid." Jake shrugged. "Then don't think of it as charity. Think of it as one ship captain helping another." Amy had already gone down to the cargo bay with her tools, eager to see how Vorthan technology worked. Jake could hear her talking excitedly with the alien engineers, sharing ideas about quantum drive repair techniques over the next 3 days. The humans and Vorthans worked together to fix the damaged engines. Jake was surprised to find that, despite their reputation for being cold and military-minded, the Vorthans were actually quite friendly once you got to know them. They shared stories about their families and their homeworld, and they were genuinely interested in human culture. Commander Zethkari proved to be particularly good company. He had traveled to many worlds and had a dry sense of humor that Jake appreciated. On the second evening, as they shared a meal in the Liberty Dawn's small galley, the commander asked Jake a question that seemed to puzzle him. "Captain Morrison, why did you help us? Your species and mine have no formal alliance. We have barely even traded with each other. You gained nothing from this delay, and in fact, it has cost you time and fuel." Jake thought about it while he chewed his food. It was not the first time someone had asked him that question, and he never seemed to have a good answer. "I guess it's just the right thing to do," he said finally. "If someone needs help and you can provide it, why wouldn't you?" Zethkari's golden eyes studied Jake's face. "This is truly how you think, pretty much. My dad used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching, but what they do when nobody is. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. He ran a small freight business too, before he passed. Taught me that reputation matters more than quick profits." The third day, Amy and the Vorthan engineers finally got the quantum drive working again. The alien ship's engines hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder, and everyone cheered. Jake felt a warm satisfaction watching the 2 groups of engineers congratulate each other, sharing techniques and laughing together despite the language barriers. As the Vorthans prepared to leave, Commander Zethkari asked to speak with Jake privately. They stood in the cargo bay, watching as the Star Wind systems came fully online. "Captain Morrison, I must repay this debt," Zethkari said seriously. "It is a matter of honor." Jake waved his hand dismissively. "Commander, you don't owe me anything. So help the next person you find who needs it." But Zethkari was already reaching into a pouch on his belt. He pulled out a small crystal device, about the size of Jake's thumb, that glowed with a soft blue light. "This is a Vorthan honor beacon," the commander explained. "It will allow you to contact me or any Vorthan ship anywhere in the galaxy. If you are ever in danger, activate it, and help will come. Jake took the device, surprised by how warm it felt in his hand. Commander, this seems like too much for just a simple repair job. Simple. Zethkari's laugh had no humor in it. Captain Morrison, you saved the lives of 52 Vorthans. In our culture, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. But this beacon represents our promise to try. As the Vorthan ship prepared to leave the cargo bay, Zethkari clasped Jake's hand in the human fashion he had learned. I hope our paths cross again, Jake Morrison. The galaxy needs more people like you. Jake watched as the Starwind flew away, her engines leaving bright trails in the darkness of space. He looked down at the beacon in his hand, then slipped it into his pocket. It seemed like such a small thing. Ready to get back on course, Captain? Cammy asked, appearing at his elbow. Yeah, Jake said, heading back toward the bridge. Let's get those medical supplies to New Geneva. As the Liberty Dawn resumed her journey, Jake had no idea that he had just changed the course of galactic history with a simple act of kindness. The beacon in his pocket seemed to pulse gently, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. 5 years had passed since Jake Morrison first met Commander Zethkari, and both men had seen their lives change in ways they never expected. Carey stood on the bridge of his newest ship, the Frontier Spirit, watching the loading crews finish securing cargo containers in the massive hold below. What had started as a one-man operation with the Liberty Dawn had grown into Morrison Freight Solutions, a company that now operated 12 ships and employed over 200 people. Captain, we've got the manifest for the Centauri run, said Lisa Morrison, walking onto the bridge with a datapad in her hand. She was 26 now, with her father's dark hair and stubborn chin. But she had inherited her mother's quick mind for business. After finishing her pilot training at the Mars Academy, she had joined her father's company and quickly proven herself as both a skilled navigator and a natural leader. Jake took the pad and scrolled through the cargo list. Medical supplies for 3 colonies, farming equipment for the new settlements on Rigel 7, and a special shipment of rare minerals that the Centauri government had specifically requested Morrison Freight to handle. It was the kind of high-value, sensitive cargo that only came to companies with perfect reputations. Any word from the Vorthans lately? Lisa asked, settling into the co-pilot seat. Jake smiled and patted his shirt pocket, where he still carried the honor beacons Zethkari had given him. Over the years, he and the Vorthan commander had stayed in touch, exchanging messages about their families and their work. Jake had learned that Zethkari had been promoted twice and now commanded an entire battle group. While Zethkari always seemed amused by stories of Jake's growing business, he sent a message last month, Jake said. He's been promoted to fleet admiral now, commands the 3rd Armada of the Vorthon Republic Navy. Over 200 ships under his command. From the guy we found floating in space with a broken engine. Lisa laughed. I bet he never forgets that. Neither do I, Jake said quietly. The Frontier Spirit was much larger than the old Liberty Dawn, with better engines, stronger shields, and room for a crew of 30. But Jake still insisted on personally overseeing the important runs, especially when they involved helping people who really needed it. Word had spread throughout the outer colonies that Morrison Freight could be trusted with anything. And they always delivered on time. As they prepared to depart, Jake's communications officer called out from her station. Captain, we're getting a priority message from the Arcturus system, marked urgent. Put it through, Jake said, settling into his command chair. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Dr. Helen Carter, the chief medical officer of Arcturus Station. She looked tired and worried, with dark circles under her eyes and gray hair that needed brushing. Captain Morrison, thank goodness you answered. We have a medical emergency here. A plague is broken out in the mining colonies on Arcturus 3. We need antiviral drugs and medical equipment, and we need them fast. Hundreds of people are already sick. Jake frowned. Dr. Carter, we're loaded for the Centauri run. Our cargo hold is full, and we have contracts to fulfill. I know, Captain, and I'm sorry to ask, but you're the only freight company with ships big enough to carry what we need. And you're the only one close enough to get here in time. The other companies, they're asking for payment up front, and the colonial government doesn't have that kind of money. Jake looked at Lisa, who was already pulling up star charts on her navigation screen. How long to reach Arcturus 3? He asked her. 4 days, if we push the engines, she replied. But Captain, if we take this job, we'll be a week late for the Centauri delivery. That's a lot of money we'll have to pay in penalties. Jake thought about the hundreds of sick miners on Arcturus 3, people who had left Earth to build new lives in a dangerous frontier. He thought about his father's old saying about doing the right thing when nobody was watching. Dr. Carter, send us your medical supply list. We'll dump our current cargo and load your emergency supplies instead. Relief flooded the doctor's face. Captain Morrison, I can't thank you enough. Colonial government will pay you back as soon as they can, but it might take a few months. Don't worry about it, Jake said. Just have those supplies ready when we get there. For cutting the connection, Jake turned to his crew. You heard the lady? We're changing course for Earth. Amy, okay, I need you to contact our suppliers and tell them we need a complete medical cargo load in 6 hours. Lisa, get in touch with the Centauri government and explain the delay. Tell them we'll make it right. Amy Rodriguez, now Jake's chief engineer and second in command, nodded from her station. She had grown into a confident leader over the years, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. Captain, this is going to cost us a lot of money. The Centauri contract alone has penalty clauses that could bankrupt a smaller company. Then it's a good thing we're not a smaller company anymore, Jake said with a grin. The next few days were a blur of activity. The Frontier Spirit raced back to Earth, where Jake's ground crew worked around the clock to load emergency medical supplies. Jake used his personal contacts and called in favors from suppliers across the solar system, putting together a cargo load that would normally take weeks to assemble while they worked. News of the Arcturus plague spread through the communication networks. Other freight companies offered to help, but only for full payment in advance. Some government officials talked about sending aid, but the bureaucratic process would take weeks. Only Morrison Freight was actually moving to help. The run to Arcturus 3 tested both the ship and crew. Jake pushed the Frontier Spirit harder than he had ever pushed any ship before. And Amy worked miracles keeping the engines from overheating. When they finally arrived at the mining colony, they found a world in crisis. The colonial spaceport was nearly deserted. Only a few medical personnel in protective suits waiting to receive the cargo. Dr. Carter met them personally, tears in her eyes as she watched the life-saving supplies being unloaded. Captain Morrison, you saved us, she said simply. Without these drugs, we would have lost thousands of people. Jake spent 3 days on Arcturus 3, helping to distribute supplies to the remote mining camps scattered across the planet's surface. He saw families reunited as the antiviral drugs took effect, and watched children who had been dying slowly return to health. It was exhausting work, but it reminded him why he had gotten into the freight business in the first place. On the trip back to Earth, Lisa asked her father a question that had been bothering her. Dad, why do we keep doing this? Taking jobs that cost us money, helping people who can't pay us back right away. The other freight companies think we're crazy. Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars through the bridge viewport. Lisa, do you remember the story I told you about meeting Commander Sethkari? Of course, you helped fix his ship when he was stranded, right? And at the time, it seemed like just a small thing. A few days delay, some fuel costs, helping out someone who was in trouble. But that small favor led to a friendship that's lasted 5 years. Sethkari has sent us business, introduced us to other Vortan traders, even helped us out of a few tight spots with pirates. Jake patted his pocket where the honor beacon rested. Sometimes the biggest rewards come from the smallest acts of kindness. We help people because it's the right thing to do, but it also turns out to be good business in the long run. Over the following months, Jake's prediction proved true. Word of Morrison Freight's help during the Arcturus plague spread throughout the outer colonies. New contracts started coming in from worlds that had heard about the company's reliability and willingness to help in emergencies. The Centauri government, instead of being angry about the delay, offered Morrison Freight an exclusive long-term contract because they were impressed by the company's humanitarian priorities. But the most significant change was one that Jake didn't know about. Far away in Vorthen space, Fleet Admiral Sethkari received regular reports about his human friend's activities. The honor beacon Jake carried contained a tracking device, not for surveillance, but so that Sethkari could keep watch over the man who had once helped him without asking for anything in return. Each time Morrison Freight helped someone in need, each act of generosity and kindness was noted and remembered. Sethkari shared these stories with his officers, and the tale of the generous human freight captain became well known throughout the Vorthen fleet. Other alien species also began to take notice. The Centauri diplomatic corps added Morrison Freight to their list of reliable humans, and Regellian merchants spoke highly of Jake's fair dealing and honest prices. Even the mysterious Arcturians, who rarely interacted with other species, had heard of the human who helped others without expecting reward. Jake Morrison had no idea that his reputation was spreading far beyond human space. He was simply running his freight business, helping people when he could, and trying to make an honest living among the stars. The honor beacon in his pocket pulsed gently with its own heartbeat, constant reminder of a friendship forged in the darkness of space. But friendships, like debts of honor, have a way of calling in their accounts when least expected. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, forces were already moving that would soon test both Jake's character and the bonds he had built with a single act of kindness years before. The stage was being set for events that would shake the foundations of interstellar commerce. And at the center of it all would be a simple freight captain who had never learned to turn away from people in need. Richard Kane stood in his office on the top floor of the Nexus Corporation building, looking out at the busy spaceport below. At 45, he was one of the richest men in human space, with a company that controlled trade routes across dozens of star systems. But lately, one name kept appearing in his reports, and it was starting to annoy him. Morrison Freight Solutions, he said to his assistant, Helen Park, who stood nearby with a data pad. Tell me about them again. Helen consulted. Her notes. Small company, sir. Started by Jake Morrison about 8 years ago. They've grown from 1 ship to 12, but they're still tiny compared to us. What's unusual is their reputation. They have a perfect delivery record, and they've never had a customer complaint. Nobody has a perfect record, Kane said flatly. What else? Well, sir, they've been taking contracts that we've been trying to secure. The Centauri government gave them exclusive rights to carry diplomatic cargo. 3 mining colonies have switched from our service to theirs, and last month they got the contract to supply the new terraforming project on Kepler 9. Kane turned from the window, his face dark with anger. One small free company is taking business from Nexus Corporation. It's not just a business, sir. It's their reputation. People trust them. They've helped during emergencies, carried supplies for free to disaster areas, and they always keep their word. Some of our clients are starting to ask why we don't do the same things. Kane walked to his desk and sat down heavily. Nexus Corporation had built its fortune by being efficient and ruthless. They charged the highest prices the market would bear. They never took unprofitable contracts, and they had driven dozens of smaller companies out of business through legal pressure and aggressive pricing. The idea that some small-time freight captain was making them look bad was unacceptable. "What do we know about this Morrison?" Kane asked. Jake Morrison, age 43, originally from Mars Colony, started with one old cargo ship called the Liberty Dawn. His daughter, Lisa, works for him as a pilot. They're based out of Titan Station, but they travel all over the Outer Rim territories. "Family business," Kane said with a cold smile, "are always the easiest to destroy. What's our first move?" Helen looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should try to buy them out first. Morrison Freight has a good reputation. If we acquired them, we could use their name to improve our own image." Kane shook his head. "I don't want to buy them. I want to crush them. A company like that threatens everything we've built. If people start expecting freight companies to be helpful and honest, it'll cost us billions." Over the next 6 months, Nexus Corporation began a systematic campaign to destroy Morrison Freight Solutions. They started small, using their political connections to create new regulations that would be expensive for smaller companies to follow. They bought out suppliers that Morrison Freight relied on, forcing Jake to pay higher prices for fuel and spare parts. When those tactics didn't work fast enough, they escalated. A Nexus security team planted illegal weapons in one of Morrison's cargo shipments, then tipped off the authorities. Jake spent 3 weeks in jail before proving his innocence, but the legal costs were enormous. Jake sat in his office on Titan Station, looking at the financial reports Amy had prepared. The numbers were not good. Legal fees, increased supply costs, and new regulatory compliance had eaten up most of their profits. 2 of their smaller clients had canceled contracts after Nexus offered them better prices. "Captain, we need to talk," Amy said, walking into the office with Lisa behind her. Both women looked worried. "I know," Jake said quietly. "We're in trouble." Lisa sat down across from her father's desk. "Dad, this isn't just bad luck. Someone is targeting us specifically. Okay? 3 suppliers have stopped selling to us in the last month. The Port Authority has started inspecting our ships twice as often as anyone else's. And yesterday, I heard that Nexus Corporation has been spreading rumors that we're financially unstable." "It's Kane," Amy said bluntly. "Richard Kane and Nexus Corporation. They want to put us out of business." Jake rubbed his tired eyes. "Why would they care about us? We're tiny compared to them." "Because we make them look bad," Lisa said. "When we help people for free, when we keep our promises, when we treat our customers fairly, it makes other companies look greedy and selfish." Before Jake could respond, his communication system chimed with an urgent message. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Dr. Martinez, the chief administrator of Haven Colony, one of their regular clients. "Captain Morrison, I'm sorry to call with bad news. We've just received word that Nexus Corporation has made us an offer to handle all our freight needs. They're charging half of what we normally pay, and they've made it clear that if we don't accept, they'll make sure no other company will work with us either." Jake felt his heart sink. Haven Colony was one of their most important clients, providing steady income that kept his company alive. "Dr. Martinez, you know, we've always treated Haven Colony fairly." "I know, Captain, and I'm sorry. But we can't risk being cut off from all freight service. We need those supply runs to survive. I'm sorry, but we have to cancel our contract with you." After the call ended, Jake sat in silence for a long moment. Amy and Lisa exchanged worried looks. "Dad, we can't keep fighting this," Lisa said gently. "Nexus has too much money and too much power. Maybe we should just sell the company while we still can." Jake shook his head and let Kane win. Let him destroy every independent freight company in the galaxy. "What's the alternative?" Amy asked. "We're bleeding money. If this keeps up, we'll be bankrupt in 6 months." Before Jake could answer, another urgent message came through. This time it was from Commander Torres of the Earth Defense Force. Captain Morrison, we have a situation. The colony on New Bethlehem has been hit by a massive earthquake. Their main city is in ruins, and they need emergency supplies immediately. We're coordinating the relief effort, but we need every available ship. Jake looked at the message details. New Bethlehem was a small farming colony with about 50,000 people. The earthquake had destroyed their spaceport and most of their infrastructure. The colony couldn't pay for emergency freight service, but without supplies, thousands of people would die. Captain, we can't afford to take a job like this, Amy said quietly. We need paying contracts, not charity work. There are other companies that can handle this, Lisa added. Nexus has dozens of ships that could get there faster than we can. Jake stared at the message for a long moment. He thought about the financial reports, about the legal bills, about the systematic campaign to destroy his company. Then he thought about 50,000 people trapped in the ruins of their homes, waiting for help that might never come. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the Vorthan honor beacon that he had carried for 5 years. The small crystal device pulsed with a soft blue light, as it had since the day Seth Kari gave it to him. Amy, prep the Frontier Spirit for emergency loading. Lisa, contact our suppliers and get everything New Bethlehem needs. Medical supplies, food, water, purification equipment, temporary shelters, everything. Dad, we can't afford this, Lisa said desperately. We can't afford not to do this, Jake replied. This is who we are. This is what Morrison Freight Solutions stands for. If we stop helping people just because it's expensive, then Kane has already won. The relief mission to New Bethlehem took 2 weeks and cost Jake almost everything he had left. But when they arrived at the devastated colony, they found thousands of people living in makeshift shelters, waiting for help. The Frontier Spirit and 2 other Morrison ships worked around the clock to distribute supplies and help with rescue operations. Jake spent his days coordinating relief efforts and his nights helping to dig survivors out of collapsed buildings. He saw families reunited, children saved from starvation, and an entire community slowly coming back to life. But while Jake was saving lives on New Bethlehem, Kane was putting the final pieces of his plan into motion. Nexus Corporation filed a lawsuit claiming that Morrison Freight had violated dozens of shipping regulations. They bribed officials to freeze Morrison's bank accounts pending investigation. They spread rumors that Jake was stealing relief supplies and selling them for profit. When Jake returned to Titan Station, he found his company in ruins. His bank accounts were frozen, his ships were grounded, pending legal action. Kay and several of his crew members had been arrested on false charges. Amy met him at the spaceport with tears in her eyes. Captain, they've destroyed us. The legal system is completely corrupt. Kane has judges and prosecutors in his pocket. They're going to take everything. Jake stood in the middle of his empty office, looking at the official papers scattered across his desk. Bankruptcy notices, arrest warrants, asset seizure orders. 5 years of work, gone in 2 weeks. Lisa walked in, her face pale with exhaustion. Dad, there's something else. I just got word from New Bethlehem. Kane has told them that if they accept any more help from us, Nexus will make sure no other company ever delivers supplies to their colony. He's using the people we just saved as hostages. For the first time since the campaign against his company began, Jake felt real despair. It was one thing to destroy his business, but using innocent colonists as leverage was beyond cruel. What do we do now? Kimi asked quietly. Jake looked down at the honor beacon in his hand. For 5 years, he had carried it as a reminder of friendship and the importance of helping others. He had never seriously considered using it, thinking that his problems were too small to bother a Vorthan fleet admiral with. But this wasn't just about his company anymore. This was about an entire colony being held hostage by corporate greed. This was about the future of independent freight companies throughout the galaxy. This was about whether good people could still make a living by doing the right thing. Jake activated the beacon, and for the first time in 5 years, its blue light changed to a bright, pulsing red. A communication channel opened, and he began recording a message. Seth Kari, this is Jake Morrison. Remember that favor you said you owed me? I need help. Not just for me, but for a lot of innocent people who are being hurt by someone who thinks power means he can do whatever he wants. I never wanted to ask for this, but I don't know what else to do. He paused, looking around at the ruins of his company, thinking about the colonists on New Bethlehem who are depending on him. I need help protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's all I've ever tried to do, and now someone wants to destroy me for it. If you meant what you said about honor debts, then I'm calling it in. Please. Jake sent the message and set the beacon down on his desk. Amy and Lisa looked at him with confusion. Dad, what was that? Lisa asked. That, Jake said quietly, was me finally learning to ask for help. What none of them knew was that the beacon's activation had sent an automatic alert to every Vorthan ship in the galaxy. Within minutes, Fleet Admiral Seth Kari was reading Jake's message, K, and his golden eyes burned with fury as he learned what had happened to his human friend. The honor debt was about to be paid in full. Fleet Admiral Seth Kari stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vorthan battleship Storm of Honor, reading Jake Morrison's message for the third time. Round him, his officers worked quietly at their stations, but they could all sense their commander's growing anger. The golden eyes that had once looked upon Jake with friendship now burned with cold fury. Communications, Seth Kari said in a voice that made his bridge crew straighten up. Send a priority message to all fleet commanders in Vorthan space. Tell them that an honor debt is being called in. I want every available ship to set course for human space immediately. His second-in-command, Captain Veltar, looked surprised. Sir, that could mean hundreds of ships. The High Command will want to know why. Seth Kari turned to face his old friend and subordinate. Tell them that 5 years ago, a human saved 52 Vorthan lives, including mine, and asked for nothing in return. Now that human is being destroyed by criminals, and innocent people are suffering because of it. Tell them this is a matter of honor. Within hours, Vorthan ships throughout the galaxy began changing course toward Earth. Battle cruisers, destroyers, supply ships, and massive dreadnoughts all received the same message. The Third Armada, under Seth Kari's direct command, was the first to move. But they were quickly joined by elements from the First and Second Armadas. But the response went far beyond just the Vorthans. Word of the honor beacon's activation spread through alien communication networks faster than anyone expected. Species that Jake had helped over the years, people who had heard stories of the generous human freight captain, began to take notice. On the Centauri homeworld, Ambassador Chiron received a message from his government's intelligence service. Sir, we're detecting massive Vorthan fleet movements toward human space. Our sources suggest it has something to do with that human freight captain who helped us during the colonial crisis 3 years ago. Chiron remembered Jake Morrison well. When Centauri refugees had been stranded on a border world with no way home, Morrison Freight had provided transportation for free, even though it meant losing money on other contracts. The Centauri government had never forgotten that kindness. Prepare a diplomatic fleet, Chiron ordered. The Vorthans are moving to help this human. Then we should be there too. On Rigel 7, Dr. Sarah Kim was treating patients in the colony's main hospital when her assistant brought her urgent news. Doctor, we're getting reports of major fleet movements. Something big is happening in human space. Dr. Kim set down her medical scanner and looked thoughtful. Is this about Jake Morrison? How did you know? 'Cause he's the only human I know who has friends in that many different alien governments. Kel, when the plague hit our colony, his company delivered medical supplies for free. Word gets around about people like that. Within minutes, Dr. Kim was on a secure channel to the Regelian Medical Council. need to send ships to human space. If someone is threatening Jake Morrison, then they're threatening the kind of person we need more of in this galaxy. Even the mysterious Arcturians, who rarely involve themselves in the affairs of other species, took notice in their crystalline cities beneath the ice of their homeworld. The Council of Observers discussed the unusual fleet movements they were detecting. "The human Morrison has been noted in our files," said Elder Crystalline Voice, her translated words echoing in the council chamber. His actions during the Kepler Station incident prevented a war between two minor species. His intervention in the asteroid mining dispute saved thousands of lives. If such a being is threatened, perhaps we should observe more closely. Meanwhile, on Earth, Jake Morrison had no idea what his simple message had set in motion. He sat in his office on Titan Station, trying to figure out how to keep his company alive for another week. Amy and Lisa were both with him, going over legal documents and financial reports that all painted the same grim picture. "The hearing is tomorrow," Amy said quietly. "The judge rules against us, they'll seize all our ships and shut down the company permanently." "And we still haven't heard anything from your Vorthan friend," Lisa added. "Dad, maybe the beacon didn't work. Maybe it's been too long." Jake picked up the honor beacon from his desk. It was still glowing red, but there had been no response to his message. He was starting to think that maybe he had been foolish to believe that a friendship from 5 years ago would matter in the face of corporate power. Captain Morrison called out his communications officer from the outer office. "Here, you need to see this. We're getting reports from all over human space. Something big is happening." Jake walked to the main communications station and looked at the screen. What he saw there made his heart stop. Dozens of alien ships were entering human space from multiple directions. Vorthon battle cruisers, Centauri, diplomatic vessels, Rigelian medical ships, and even a few ships from species he didn't recognize. "Sir," the communications officer said with awe in her voice, "we're getting reports from every major spaceport in human space. Alien fleets are arriving everywhere, and they're all asking the same question." "What question?" "They want to know where they can find Jake Morrison." "Earth, in the headquarters of Nexus Corporation." Richard Kane was having the worst day of his career. His assistant burst into his office without knocking, her face pale with fear. "Sir, we have a problem. A big problem." Kane looked up from his desk, where he had been reviewing the final legal documents that would destroy Morrison Freight Solutions. "What now, sir?" "There are over 300 alien warships in Earth orbit. Vorthan, Centauri, Rigelian, and others. They're demanding to speak with Earth's government about what they call crimes against." Kane felt the blood drained from his face. "That's impossible. Morrison is nobody. He runs a tiny freight company." "Sir, the Vorthan Fleet Admiral just sent a message directly to the President. He says that anyone who harms Jake Morrison is an enemy of the Vorthan Republic. The Centauri ambassador is demanding a full investigation into Nexus Corporation's business practices, and the Rigelians are threatening to cut off all medical trade with Earth unless Morrison is protected." Kane walked to his window and looked up at the sky. Even in daylight, he could see the alien ships hanging in orbit like dark stars, hundreds of them representing species with technology far beyond anything humans possessed. "Sir," his assistant continued, "the President's office just called. They want to see you immediately." And sir, they didn't sound happy. On Titan Station, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his office building, looking up at the alien ships that filled the sky. Amy and Lisa stood beside him, all three of them stunned by what they were seeing. "Dad," Lisa said quietly, "what exactly did you do 5 years ago?" "I helped fix a broken engine," Jake said, shaking his head in disbelief. A new voice spoke from behind them. "You did much more than that, my friend." They turned to see Fleet Admiral Zethkari walking toward them, flanked by 2 Vorthan guards. He was taller than Jake remembered, and his uniform showed the insignia of his high rank. But his golden eyes held the same warmth Jake remembered from their first meeting. Seth Kari, Jake said, stepping forward to clasp his old friend's hand. You came. I brought a few ships with me, the Vorthan Admiral said with a slight smile. 837, to be exact, plus about 200 more from other species who wanted to help. Jake looked stunned. All of this for me, not just for you, Jake Morrison. For what you represent, the galaxy too often driven by greed and selfishness. You have shown that there are still those who help others simply because it is right. That is worth protecting. Sakari gestured toward the window where the alien fleets hung in space. Every species out there has a story about you. Centauri refugees you helped. The Regelian colonies you supplied during emergencies. The mining dispute you helped resolve. It's the asteroid miners whose lives you saved. You may think of yourself as just a freight captain, but to them, you are proof that goodness still exists. Amy stepped forward. Admiral, what happens now? Now, Seth Kari said, his voice growing cold. We deal with those who thought they could destroy a good man with impunity. For Vorthan Republic considers any attack on Jake Morrison to be an attack on our honor. The other species feel similarly. Don't want anyone to get hurt because of me, Jake said quickly. No one will be hurt, Seth Kari assured him. But there will be consequences. This Richard Kane and his Nexus Corporation will learn that some things are more powerful than money and corruption. As if summoned by his words, Jake's communication system activated. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to President Sarah Walsh of the Earth's colonial government. Captain Morrison, she said, I'm calling to personally apologize for what has happened to you and your company. We've just finished meeting with representatives from several alien governments, and we've learned some very disturbing things about Nexus Corporation's business practices. Jake felt a surge of hope. Madam President, Captain, all charges against you and your company are being dropped immediately. Our investigation has revealed that evidence was planted and officials were bribed. Richard Kane and his associates will be facing criminal charges for fraud, corruption, and corporate terrorism. Behind the president, Jake could see other government officials scrambling around, clearly in crisis mode. Captain Morrison, the president continued, your reputation among our alien allies is extraordinary. They've made it very clear that Earth's continued good relations with them depend on making sure you're treated fairly. We're going to do everything we can to repair the damage that's been done to your company. After the call ended, Jake sat down heavily in his chair. The events of the last few days seemed impossible to believe. So, what happens next? Lisa asked. Seth Kari placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. Next, my friend, you get back to doing what you do best. Helping people, carrying cargo, being the good man you've always been. But now, you'll do it knowing that if anyone tries to stop you, they'll have to answer to a lot of very powerful friends. Jake looked out at the alien fleets filling Earth's sky and shook his head in wonder. A simple act of kindness 5 years ago had grown into something beyond his wildest imagination. I still can't believe all this, he said. Believe it, Seth Kari replied. Good deeds have a way of growing beyond what we expect. And sometimes, Jake Morrison, they call forth fleets. 3 months after the alien fleets filled Earth's sky, Richard Kane sat in a prison cell on Luna Station, staring at the gray walls that would be his home for the next 20 years. The trial had been swift and decisive. Evidence of corruption, bribery, and corporate terrorism had poured in from dozens of worlds. Witnesses came forward to testify about Nexus Corporation's illegal activities. And even some of Kane's own employees had turned against him. The Nexus Corporation was finished. Its assets had been sold off to pay for damages, and its trade routes had been redistributed to smaller, independent freight companies. The era of corporate monopolies in space freight was over, at least for now. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison stood in the conference room of the newly constructed Free Trade Alliance headquarters on Titan Station. Through the large windows, he could see ships from a dozen different species docked at the station's expanded ports. What had started as a crisis had become an opportunity to build something better. The Vorthan Republic has agreed to provide security escorts for independent freight companies operating in dangerous sectors. Charon of the Centauri government. The Regelian Medical Council will offer emergency medical support for any crew members injured in the line of duty. Jake looked around the table at the representatives from various alien governments. Just 6 months ago, he had been fighting for his company's survival. Now he found himself at the center of an interstellar alliance dedicated to protecting independent traders and ensuring fair business practices throughout the galaxy. The Arcturian Council has offered to provide navigation data for safe passage through unexplored regions, added Elder Crystalline Voice, her translated words carrying across the room. We believe that supporting honest commerce benefits all species. Fleet Admiral Seth Kari, who had been promoted to Grand Admiral after the successful intervention on Earth, leaned back in his chair. The most important thing we've accomplished is sending a message. Anyone who tries to use corruption and violence to control trade will face the combined response of the Alliance. Lisa Morrison, who had been taking notes throughout the meeting, looked up from her datapad. We've already had 12 applications from freight companies wanting to join the Alliance. Word is spreading that independent traders finally have protection against corporate bullies. Jake nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Despite all the success, despite the new alliance and the restoration of his company, he still felt like the same simple freight captain he had always been. The attention and praise made him uncomfortable. He was much more at ease loading cargo and flying between the stars than sitting in diplomatic meetings. "There's nothing else?" Jake said, standing up from the table. "I have a cargo run to New Bethlehem. They're still rebuilding from the earthquake, and they need construction supplies." Seth Kari smiled at his human friend. "Still making deliveries, personally, I see." "Someone has to do the work," Jake replied with a grin. "All this talking doesn't move cargo." After the meeting ended, Jake walked through the corridors of Titan Station toward the docking bay where the Frontier Spirit was being loaded. The station had changed dramatically over the past few months. What had once been a simple freight depot was now a bustling center of interstellar commerce, with alien merchants, human traders, and diplomats from across the galaxy conducting business. Amy Rodriguez met him at the ship's airlock, her coveralls stained with grease as usual. "Captain, we're almost finished loading. The construction equipment is secured, and we've got those medical supplies Dr. Martinez requested." "Any word from the other crews?" Jake asked as they walked toward the bridge. "The Liberty Dawn is making a run to the Rigel colonies, and the Star Trader is carrying diplomatic cargo to the Centauri homeworld." "Business is good, Captain. Better than it's ever been." Jake settled into his captain's chair and looked at the departure schedule. Morrison Freight Solutions now operated 23 ships and employed over 400 people. The company that had almost been destroyed by Richard Kane was now one of the most respected freight operations in human space. "Captain," Lisa called. Out from the navigation station, we're cleared for departure. Course laid in for New Bethlehem. The Frontier Spirit pulled away from Titan Station. Jake watched the alien ships in the docking bays through the viewports. Vorthan cruisers, Centauri diplomatic vessels, Regelian medical ships, and others, all working together to support the Free Trade Alliance. It still amazed him that his simple act of helping a stranded ship had led to all of this. "Dad," Lisa said, settling into the co-pilot seat. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't helped Commander Seth Kari that day?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "I probably would have delivered those medical supplies to New Geneva on time, made a little profit, and continued running cargo, like always. And Kane would have destroyed us without anyone to stop him." "Maybe," Or maybe someone else would have stood up to him eventually. Good people have a way of finding each other, Lisa, and bad people have a way of making enemies. The trip to New Bethlehem took 4 days, and when they arrived, Jake was pleased to see how much progress the colony had made. New buildings were rising from the ruins of the old city, and the spaceport had been completely rebuilt. The people who had once been desperate refugees were now busy with the work of rebuilding their lives. Dr. Martinez met them at the cargo bay, her face bright with hope instead of the desperation Jake remembered from months earlier. "Captain Morrison, you can't imagine how good it is to see you again. The construction equipment you're bringing will let us finish the new hospital next month." "How are people doing?" Jake asked as his crew began unloading the supplies. "Better every day. The medical supplies you brought during the emergency saved thousands of lives. And now, with the Free Trade Alliance guaranteeing fair prices and reliable deliveries, we don't have to worry about being cut off from the rest of the galaxy." As Jake watched the colonists working together to unload cargo and begin construction projects, he felt the same satisfaction he had always found in his work, helping people, solving problems, making sure that goods got where they were needed. That was what mattered to him, not the diplomatic meetings or the ceremonies honoring his contributions to interstellar relations. "Captain," Amy called out, "we've got an incoming message from Admiral Zethkari." Jake walked to the communication station and accepted the call. Zethkari's face appeared on the screen, and Jake could see the bridge of a Warthan warship behind him. "Jake, my friend, I wanted to let you know that the Alliance Council has made a decision. We're going to establish a permanent monument on Titan Station, commemorating the founding of the Free Trade Alliance." "That's nice," Jake said, though he looked uncomfortable with the idea. "The monument will feature the honor beacon I gave you 5 years ago, the one that started all of this." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the small crystal device. It no longer glowed red as it had during the crisis. Now it pulsed with a gentle blue light, the same color it had shown for years before he activated it. Said Skari, "I think I'd rather keep this with me, if you don't mind. It reminds me of why I do this work." The Vorthan Admiral smiled. "Of course, my friend, but I have something else for you." Zethkari held up a new beacon, this one larger and more ornate than the original. "This is a Grand Alliance beacon. It connects you directly to the emergency response network we've established. Anyone, anywhere, in Alliance space needs help that local authorities can't provide. They can contact you directly." Jake took the new device, feeling its weight in his hand. "So I'm officially the galaxy's emergency freight captain now. You're the person we all trust to do the right thing when it matters most. That's more important than any official title." After the call ended, Jake put both beacons in his pocket and returned to supervising the cargo unloading. Lisa walked up beside him, watching the colonists work. "Kay, do you think we'll ever get back to just being a simple freight company?" "Kay?" Jake looked around at the bustling activity, the construction crews, the families working together to rebuild their community. "Lisa, I don't think we were ever just a simple freight company. We were always something more than that. We just didn't know it yet." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when you help people because it's the right thing to do, when you keep your promises and treat everyone fairly, you're not just moving cargo. You're moving hope. You're proving that there are still good people in the galaxy who can be trusted." As the frontier spirit prepared to depart New Bethlehem, Jake stood on the bridge and looked back at the growing colony. In a few months, the hospital would be finished. The new schools would open. Families would have permanent homes instead of temporary shelters. All because people had worked together to help each other. "Course laid in for Titan Station, Captain," Lisa reported. "Take us home," Jake said, as they flew through space toward their next destination. Jake felt the two beacons in his pocket, the original honor beacon that had started as a simple thank you between friends. and the new alliance beacon that connected him to countless worlds and millions of people who might someday need help. He thought about his father's old saying about doing the right thing when nobody was watching. It turned out that somebody was always watching, and that small acts of kindness had a way of growing into something much larger than anyone expected. Jake Morrison had learned that sometimes when you extend a single favor to someone in need, you don't just make a friend, you plant a seed that can grow into fleets, alliances, and hope for the future. And that, he thought, as he watched the stars stream past the viewports, was the most valuable cargo he had ever carried.